Oh man, we are in here. Welcome to Board Game Hunt. What? That's not the name of my channel. Oh my goodness. Welcome to Cardboard Hunter. I'm Sterling, and today we're talking about cull culture. So, what is cull culture? Let me ask you this. Would you rather have these games? Or would you rather have this game? Now, why I say that is because you actually have a choice in your collection what you're going to have. And I think a lot of us get in the habit of buying a lot of random games. And look, I am not shaming. I, in fact, think you should step that up. But jokes aside, I do want to talk about culling and refining a collection. Because when we started this channel, or when I started this channel, I guess, the goal was to talk about grails as opposed to shiny and flashy new games. And we need to get back to that. So culling is just picking out a chunk of your board games to get rid of, to sell, to give away, to auction, to, whatever you want to do. But I add an extra step to that. I add buying more games, because I have gotten to the point with my collection where I actually sell the games I don't play as much or that just aren't that wow factor, and I use that money to recycle into grail collecting, into games that I really want in my collection, that I think are really special, hard to come by, that normally would just sit on a wish list forever. But at the end of the day, if I've got 4 or 5 $20 to $50 games that are collecting dust, or that I know tons of people who also have these games, not really a reason for it to be in my collection, even if I ever wanted to play them, I can take that money and buy something really special with it. So since we are talking about my collection, let's jump over to my collection for a second. So anyone who's been with the channel for a while now knows this area. This is where we started Cardboard Hunter before I built the little studio on the other side of the room. And I figured we should return to it today for at least part of this video. So the first thing is, how do I choose what to cull? So I tend to be very aware of games in my collection that likely will not last for a very long time in my collection, because I have ingrained culling into just how I engage in the hobby as a whole. Pretty much anytime I buy a new game, it's a question of how long is this going to set in my collection before I let it go on its way. Pretty much every game I buy is temporary in that regard, unless it earns its keep. So I don't just buy a game and put it on my shelf and build a huge shelf of shame. Trust me, I've been there, and I still have a small one, but a lot smaller than most of my board gaming friends, just because I don't let them sit and collect dust for a while. I can turn that into StarCraft, which I have laying over there, which I'm very excited about, which I'm going to get into a good example and how I came across StarCraft here in a second. So for me, I tend to have my lower shelves are games that, maybe not necessarily on the chopping block, but I know that I'm going to consider them. So if I have a game that hasn't truly earned its place yet, I'll probably put it on the lower end of my calyx, and either they'll work up to a more permanent spot, or they'll start transitioning to the smaller calyx over there that is pretty much simply to store games that are on their way out. I just say that so you understand that when I get games, it's always in the back of my mind. It's always, are these going to stay, or are these going to go? And I'm pretty active in a lot of communities where people trade and sell board games. And I'll go into some of those examples here in a second, so I can point you into some great direction of how to get rid of games, because that's a big question a lot of people have. And I know a lot of people with big collections, 300 to 500 plus, it gets really daunting. I mean, just making a list of hundreds of games that you would be willing to let go of is a couple days affair on its own. And we're going to talk more about that later. But I was at I know I was approaching 300 games before I really got crazy about it. I think I'm down to like 120 right now. And I'm very happy at that number. Between that 120, 150 mark is really where I get the most games tabled. So I am not saying that a big board game collection is a bad thing. I'm an art appreciator, and these are all pieces of art. If that's your main way or even an important way to engage in this hobby, you shouldn't be shamed for that. You should do that all you want to. There's few things in this life that we can find joy in, and these are very joyous items. So I totally understand people who do like their large collections, and do you, you know? But I will say from my personal experience as someone who likes to play board games, I do find the smaller my collection is, the more I play board games. And there's a few reasons for that. One, I don't have a huge shelf of shame that I'm constantly trying to toss new games in for game night. And trust me, anyone with big collections knows the pain of your game buddies or family or friends saying, oh my God, are you ever actually going to bring the same game twice so we don't have to learn a new game every time we play? And obviously the answer is no, that is harassment. But in all seriousness, when you do get to a smaller collection, you do get games tabled more often, and all of your friends and family will thank you for that. And another reason is when I have a really large collection, I notice that I've got to take some days out of my month just to sit down and relearn some of the games that might get tabled in the next couple months. And there's really a timeline on that. If I have a game that I haven't really tabled yet, I'm going to sit down and learn it, and I'm either going to play it in the next 2 to 3 months tops, or I'm going to be right back here having to sit down and learn it again for potential game nights. And when you have hundreds of games, that gets intense. I remember at that 300 mark, I would have days where I'd sit down with 5 to 10 games and just sit on the table and play them by myself and learn the rule books. I'd go to bed with literal piles of rule books for various games, and I'd be sitting there reading through them while my fiance is reading what I can only describe as fairy porn, which is cool. I'm very much pro fairy porn. No shaming. But it would just be weird. She's reading this actual piece of true literature, having a great time, and I'm over here learning Six Siege, which was worth it. Trust me, very much worth it. But I would just constantly be reading rule books and sitting down and learning these games, and the amount of these games that never got tabled afterwards got really daunting. So the point is, if you have less of those games to learn and your games are getting tabled more frequently because you have less of them to go through, you don't have nearly as big of a mission to stay updated on the rules for the games that are important to you that you want to table. And it has literally translated to me playing more games. And that alone is worth it, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about places to unload your games, because that's the big thing. Now, first of all, if you have a very large collection, don't go crazy. Pick out 20, 30 games tops and start there. Do not go making a list of 200 games and post it, mainly because when you post these huge lots in a lot of these places I'm going to talk about, people just aren't going to scroll through that many. You literally will sell less games that way. So just take them a chunk at a time. Pick 20 to 30 that you think will settle easier, and take it from there. And then some of these other methods will work a little better for different types of lots and different types of games. First of all, Board Game Geek is a great place. Now, Board Game Geek, if you were going to go through the hassle of, making a list of hundreds of games, 100 plus games that you were looking to sell, Board Game Geek is where to do it, because the beauty in Board Game Geek is you can just post them all up there, and they'll just chill until someone hits you up to buy them. So people are seeing these one game at a time in most cases. However, one thing to know about Board Game Geek is most people will look at games that have been on there for the last month or two, maybe 3. But if you've put your list of 200 games on Board Game Geek and now it's 6 months later and you still have a lot of them up there, you've probably got to refresh that list. But Board Game Geek is also a great place to trade games. There's a great trade community. There's a great feedback system implemented into the website, so you can see who has a lot of completed trades with good feedback. So that's cool. I like to do that on occasion. Next up is, of course, eBay. For anyone who hasn't used eBay before, it's still the king in this realm. eBay is nice because you can throw games up and leave them for as long as you like. The amount of time they've been up there is not going to really affect them like Board Game Geek will. If you're willing to get competitive on your prices, you can move games much faster. So firstly, let's talk about how to value your games. So there's two main ways. One is just go to Board Game Geek and look at what other people are selling those games for. That will give you a ballpark idea. The other way is to go on eBay, search for the game, and then under filters, click sold. And then you can scroll and see actual sold prices of the games. Now, they sometimes hide a little information here, but it will definitely give you a great ballpark. Otherwise, you can go on Facebook groups, search the games and see what other people priced them at. And, other than that, go off vibes. Vibes work. So once you have a ballpark idea of what the game's value is, I recommend putting it just a little bit lower than market, because the games are going to move that much faster, and that couple extra dollars isn't worth the added time management, in my opinion. There is, of course, the Facebook Marketplace and groups. Now, Facebook Marketplace kind of depends a little bit about the area you're in. I'm at least kind of close to Atlanta, so if I post games for sale, it's not that hard to kind of get some attention that way. It's not nearly as good as other avenues, but the good thing about it is you don't have to worry about shipping in most cases. You just meet up locally if you're willing to do that, and you can post fairly large lots, and usually you'll sell several games at a time if someone's going to come meet up with you locally. Cut them a deal, let them grab a couple games. Cool. There's also, of course, Facebook groups, which there are a ton of. If you join the Discord, our Discord, I'm happy to give you a ton of Facebook groups to check out if you're not familiar with them. And there's some thriving communities where people are constantly selling and trading games, and they tend to work very well, especially if you're willing to be competitive on your prices. You'll find that a lot of people are kind of looking for every game you can imagine. So, sometimes I post games in there that I'm like, oh my God, no one is ever going to want this. And they'll usually be the first ones to sell. It's very strange. There's also some Facebook groups that are a bit more niche. So you'll have groups that are specifically for trading, specifically for selling, specifically for like Kickstarter stuff. There's one group that is especially a niche where people basically sell tickets that are valued at a fraction of the game, and someone's name gets pulled. And that group is really fun. It's called Board Game Waffles. That one is especially interesting because it's a group where you can kind of move some of these really large games that are much harder to sell otherwise, because everyone's kind of throwing in a little bit on it, so it's not that daunting. I've seen games well over $1,000 that get moved there that Lord knows what it would take to move elsewhere. Also, a great place to win some pretty cool games that are really rare. I have a few here. In fact, yeah, Merlin's Company and the base Shadows over Camelot both came from that group, as well as that Bruce Lee Unmatched over there, which I don't even have any of the other Unmatched stuff. I don't even know what I'm going to do with that. Other than that, the best place is your local communities. If you have board game shops around you, chances are they'll do events a couple times a year where you can set up a table and sell your own games. Typically, it's for store credit, but I've really done well at some of those events. If you have a local shop around you that doesn't do that, suggest they do it. Trust me, it's a win-win, because most of these shops, like I said, they're gonna tell you you have to sell the games for store credit. Someone will go to the counter, buy a gift card for the amount of money you're selling the game for, and then they bring and hand you the gift card, and then at the end of the day, you basically turn them all into one gift card, and you've got some money to spend in the store. But also, you can take those gift cards and buy other games people are selling at their tables with those gift cards. That's how I got StarCraft. I just had a table filled with a bunch of games I didn't care about and took a few of those, which I sold, and then took those gift cards and bought StarCraft. So I literally left my house with a bunch of games that I didn't care to have in my collection anymore and came back with a super amazing Grail that I've always wanted, as well as a couple $100 in store credit to still spend. So that was super cool. There's 2 local shops here around me within the hour of Atlanta. I'm pretty sure Gigabytes also does it, but I live quite a ways from there. But Level Up and Meeple Madness, which are both close to me, they do this at least 2 to 4 times a year. I don't know exactly how many. I make most of those, and it's an absolute blast. It's a chance to hang out with a bunch of my friends because a lot of my friends from the local community go, and we just all kind of hang out and shoot the shit and, you know, get some store credit and sometimes some grails, which also a lot of people are bringing games there that are very hard to find. There'll be games that have been sitting on their shelves for a decade plus, and they don't even realize how much they're worth sometimes. I've scored some pretty spectacular grails just walking over to another table while I was already there. StarCraft, he was aware of what that was worth, so he did pretty good there. But still, you know, I didn't spend any extra money I didn't have that day, so that was nice. Also, getting involved in these local communities like these game shops, game nights, you know, they'll usually have a Discord, or even the people there you get to know and say, hey, I've got a little list of games. If you're interested, take a look through them. I'll give you a good deal on them. But also the Discord, a lot of these stores, pretty much every store these days has a Discord channel where they have an area to trade, sell, and buy games from other members of the Discord. And that's a great place to go. In fact, there are actually really large Discord channels specifically for this, or just large Discord channels that also have a thriving buy, sell, and trade community built into them. Our Discord has a, you know, it's growing. We have a section for that, and I've even sold a few games there. I've seen some other people do well. You can join our Discord and post some games there, and I can also give you some links in the Discord to other Discords to check out where you can do the same thing that are probably a lot more active than ours for the buying and trading. So the main reason I do this is this hobby can be really expensive, as I'm sure you all know. At a certain point, you realize you've got a lot of games and you still want more games. Well, turn games into games, you know? That's what's worked for me. It's been a while since I've had to dip into like my own bank account to buy new games, and I'm constantly going through games because I'm just always in this recycling phase. You know, once my collection got so large, it was kind of a blessing. It turned itself into this little investment bank account that I could tap into. And, you know, I just see my board game money as money for board games. So I don't find myself in situations where I have to sell a chunk of my collection to pay for bills, fingers crossed. I know those situations can happen, and I know a lot of you probably have been there, and I'm very sorry for that. But for the most part, when I'm selling off games myself, it is specifically to give me that little extra cash that I can spend towards games so I don't have to cut back in other areas of my life. And also, one thing that's really cool, like I was saying, if you've got a bunch of games that other people in your game groups have, you know, why does everyone need a copy of Wingspan? Oh my God, I've got a copy, don't I? Why do I need it? I know why I need it, because I have family that, no, I bought them a copy. I think I can sell Wingspan. Oh my God, that brings me joy. Anyway, so like I was saying, you don't need to have games that other people have, or even games that are super common, because you might go to a convention where those are just going to be readily available too. And if this isn't a game you're going to play several times throughout the year, do you really need to have it on your shelf? I don't think so. What happens is you start to prioritize those really special and rare and just games that mean a lot to you. And also, I have started to prioritize games that I know I can play, because trust me, I've got games like Roads and Boats and probably even StarCraft that are going to be pretty hard for me to get my groups to play. I'll probably get StarCraft tabled, but I have quite a few games that, you know, are really just for me, you know, kind of thing. And for the most part, I've gotten away from that. I have sold games that I really thought were awesome and I wanted to keep, but I just had to admit to myself that they were either too similar to other games. Like Wonderland's War, I think is going to be one of my next to go. Absolutely brilliant game. I'd love to have it in my collection. I'm just not going to table it anytime soon. I've got quite a few area control games that I'd just rather table over that, especially since it's got a decent teach. So I'll probably let that one be on its way, just for the simple fact that it's one less new game I have to teach a bunch of people. And if I really wanted to play Wonderland's War, I'm sure I could find someone, at least at a convention, that brought a copy and we can play it. But what happens is your collection becomes an expression of who you are as a gamer, like a fingerprint, so to say. Like my collection right here, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have every game here, but I highly doubt there's too many people that have all of these games in one collection. For the most part, this exact wall right here, this is me as a gamer. I don't think there's anyone else who has Automobiles, Battlestar Galactica, Bus, Turfmaster, Imperial 2030, Santiago. Just this wall that brings me so much joy, that is a perfect representation of who I am as a gamer. This is unique to me. And that's really cool, because then you get to go to game night and you're kind of bringing a part of who you are as a gamer. Your games you bring are always a reflection of what is special to you in the hobby. And that's the best part of a game night to me, is going and sitting down with games that other people love and showing them games I love. You know, we don't always have to play the same games everybody plays. We can play these really cool and more unique games. So let's jump back over to the main side. I also mentioned conventions. I mean, if you're like me, you love a good board game convention, and that's another place where you could typically sell some games. Most of these conventions will have a day where you can come set up a table and offload some of your games. Not only is that a good way to recycle into more games, it's kind of a way to pay for the convention trip as a whole. I know people who go to conventions, take games with them just to sell them there and knock out that cost for the hotel and such. And, you know, I think that's really smart. I've never done that, but I should start doing it. You know, I actually have my collection tilled down pretty tightly that I don't know if I could really put a dent in my convention costs that way. But you get the point. If you've got a big collection like that, that's always an option. And also, if you're just looking to offload games, you know, find a coffee shop that may want to start some game nights and give them a few games to get started. Use them as a tool. Give them to friends who aren't so into board gaming that you want to expose to board gaming, so that they can get hooked and come to board game night, because the point of board games is to play them. Also, getting into this whole Cull culture mentality allows you the opportunity to buy to try games. Sometimes I'll buy a pretty pricey Grail game that may not be right for me, but I really want to give it a shot. And I'll sit down, I'll get a few tables and be like, yeah, this didn't quite work for me. But now that I have all these avenues to offload the game, it's not that hard to just let it go and try something different. You know, a lot of people complain about these rare out-of-print games, but truth be told, they're typically no more than your average all-in Kickstarter. And also, if you've got a shelf of 50 to 100 games that you really could do without, you don't really have to complain about that. You can just turn those games into these games you want more. So anyone who has other suggestions on this, please type in the comments. Let me know how you do it. I know most people, their reservation is just the starting point. And I was the same way. I had so many games that I just liked them there on the shelf. And once I started doing this, I got hooked. I couldn't stop, because once I learned that this was an avenue to get my hands on games I wanted even more, all bets were off. I was all in, and I have been since. So I hope that this was informative for people. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments. Please join the Discord. It's a great way to engage in the hobby, in my opinion. Until next time, keep hunting that cardboard and flipping that cardboard.